Now, imagine if you had a crop that you could harvest every 36 hours. But there's a problem. You need to work out how to extract the protein from that. This is duckweed. Now, there's researchers at the moment combing our waterways to be able to identify an opportunity around a New Zealand native weed that is growing in our waterways that could be the next edible protein opportunity. The great people at FoodHQ are constantly working on multiple different, the new future of our food and fibre. And joining us now is Business Development Manager Amos Palfreyman. Good evening.
Hi, Sarah. Great to be on the show.
Thank you so much for joining us again. Now, this is very fascinating and interesting. What led to a fascination with how duckweed could be a new opportunity?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. It's not what you would probably think and come top of mind when you're thinking of future food. But actually, we have FoodHQ in the past has been down in Netherlands, and they worked with a couple companies there who are doing it at scale in Wageningen. And it's really interesting to see the low impact and high protein return. So you're looking at a water reticulation rate of close to 95%, and then a biomass in the plant that sort of doubles every 24 to 36 hours, and then a really high quality protein with all the essential amino acids. And the dry matter, once the plant has been taken off water and dried, it's about 40 to 60% protein content. So it all sort of ticks the boxes, and I thought it's too good not to explore. And serendipitously, PKW over in Taranaki, a wonderful Maori farming corporation, they've diversified their business a lot, and alongside their dairy farming, they're always looking for new and innovative ways where they can create great food products and create value for their shareholders. And so we were connected, and the project has begun, and it's in the early stages, but it's really exciting to be doing a first in New Zealand, and also the possibility of a world first if we can establish the provenance of the native plant that we have here in New Zealand.
You say world first, but I'd love to understand, was there somewhere around the world that the concept actually transpired, this idea around it being an edible protein, that we're modelling it off?
Yeah, it's been used for stock feed in various countries on and off for years. And it's only been recently, as there's been so much more pressure on existing food systems and agricultural systems, especially with water intakes and environmental footprint, that people have really begun exploring that plant to be used as human food. And right now in the world, there's just a couple other players that are moving in that space, and they've largely been financed by early stage capital players like venture finance. And they tend to be built on research that are coming out of really powerful universities. So there's some commercial trials in the Netherlands underway, and also in the United States. And there's a company in Israel that's also working on a variation of it. And so then it's cool to have New Zealand up there as well, breaking some new ground.
I'd love to know, in your role as Business Development Manager for FoodHQ, last week we had Karen Koss from Apiculture New Zealand with the exciting news that iwi have jumped on board to confirm that Manuka is a Maori term, and we should have control over the very lucrative Manuka honey. When it's a native plant like this in New Zealand and you're working with an iwi, how do we jump on that IP opportunity early and position ourselves with that premium and make sure it's available just here in New Zealand?
Yeah, so that's absolutely part of the strategy, and we're working quite closely with Manaki Whenua and their head of Maori business development, who's looking at exactly that. Is there a way to protect that provenance story, or to create a brand or a name around it that can be utilised as being unique to New Zealand, and will have a copyright against it so that it won't be a worldwide term? So that's exactly along our thinking.
Oh, fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that we have learnt from the past. Now, what are you learning from Maori agribusiness and the future opportunities that we can all benefit here in New Zealand when you take an iwi business that is in dairy that's seeking other off-farm opportunities? literally, in the waterways, to create multi-land use and then therefore transfer that information to farmers and growers across the country?
Yeah, I think it's really quite inspirational that a Maori corporate is leading this. It's tend to be that they have been driven by a really traditional industry, but it's another great example of how they're breaking through with innovation. And I think it's wonderful that they take an intergenerational approach to their strategic planning. So you've got a really powerful value proposition about wanting to build wealth over a period of time rather than looking for just what will add an extra dollar in our pocket tomorrow. So I think that's a really amazing thing, and there's a lot of New Zealand businesses can learn from that.
And you have done a lot of deep research around the world, Amos, I know, and the future trends of our consumer heavily in the health and well-being space and the nutritional value of our products. How big is it when we start to focus on superfoods?
I think it's a really important strategy for New Zealand. I mean, the oldest mantra that I sort of grew up with was moving from volume to value, and it's been a little bit, I guess, confused over the period because you can drive a significant amount of value from volume of some products. But I think that that's really where New Zealand has always wanted to go, is looking for those niches in markets like providing health and wellness, food ingredients or food products to consumers that we can really slap a premium on and get a good return for our raw product.
Now, talking about edible protein no longer is defined around our traditional protein sources of dairy and red meat. What type of opportunities is FoodHQ starting to explore, and what's on the horizon in dealing with the likes of government to support your initiatives?
Yeah, so it's interesting that you bring that up. We're actually running a network or a community of innovators focused on what we're calling emerging proteins. So exactly what you've just mentioned. And that will be launched on the 10th of August. And in terms of government engagement, we're very happy to have Damien O'Connor, Minister for Agriculture in New Zealand, to be one of the guest speakers on that launch. You can find the info about that at our website, foodhq.com. And basically the thought process behind this is that we want to make sure that we're doing this smart and not duplicating stuff all around the country. So if there's a farmer that's experimenting with a quinoa protein, like some of them are in New Zealand, we want to make sure that those learnings can be shared and that there's a way for them to network and communicate. And we also want to make sure that that's across the value chain as well. So not just between farmers and growers, but trying to understand, can we connect them to food ingredient manufacturers or food manufacturers so that they have a really clear line of sight to what the new emerging sources of protein are and how they can work with them to derive value.
You've really nailed it there, because around that partnership element that FoodHQ really work on is the real handbrake that I'm hearing here in Canterbury, particularly around new protein sources, is the secondary industry, the manufacturing industry. That's where the funding, capital and sort of incentive seems to be lacking. We have this incredible versatile farmers and growers in the primary sector, and we're teaching at a tertiary level some incredibly bright minds, but if we can't actually add the value, we're struggling. What is your thoughts on that?
I think that's where the connecting across the value chain is so important, because then what you're actually able to do is you're able to show a farmer and grower who an end user for what you're growing is, and then someone that wants to use New Zealand ingredients, rather than bringing over pea protein from Ukraine or other places around the world, we can actually use emerging protein sources in New Zealand to put into food products. And when you start to connect the dots there, that allows for a pretty strong investment case to be made for building manufacturing infrastructure in the middle. But unless those dots are connected, you're going to have a farmer and grower who's just growing a new protein source and doesn't really know what it will end up or where it will go, and it's hard to justify investing much. In the same way, it's hard for a food manufacturer to know exactly what the ingredients are available here in New Zealand, because it's such a new and emerging space. So we're really looking to connect that across, and realizing that lots of the companies we work with are traditional livestock agriculture companies, and they're looking at the synergies between animal and plant proteins. And I think there will be a great opportunity to have a new suite of products that are what we would deem hybrid. So taking the best of both worlds, taking some of this really good animal protein and the high digestibility it has and the provenance story, then also looking what are some interesting bioactives or plant proteins that could also buffer it up or make it a more complete product.
Absolutely. I was just thinking in my head around like a speed dating expo opportunity, like a New Zealand Agri-Food Week meets Boma Grow of all of these New Zealand manufacturers meeting all these keen growers and they're coming together. Amos, I'm sure that you're working on that with Abby Thompson and the great people at FoodHQ.
Yeah, you read my mind.
No, and we've got great minds. I'm so fortunate to be a part of this country. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Business Development Manager for FoodHQ, Amos Palfreyman.
This is Sarah's Country.